But let's go ahead and kick off our discussion today. Again, thanks for being here. This is a 2020 year-end recap. There's a lot to talk about this year. My name is George Fernandez. I'm the Vice President of Practice Management here at Mariner Wealth Advisors. And, we believe in something very simple here at Mariner Wealth Advisors, and that is we are advocates for our clients. And I think that when you think about an advocate for your client, that's really somebody who doesn't just know what's going on in the world around you. It's also somebody who knows you specifically. So all of you on the other end of this voice today have certain things going on in your life, and so we would get to know who you are as we work with you to become your advocate. So that's what that really means. And today we're going to do two things today. To be an advocate, again, it's one thing to know what's happening all around us, but it's also another thing to know who you are. And so we're going to be talking about those two topics today more specifically. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of what's going on this year from a market perspective, what's going on with some legislative changes that have happened this year. But we're not going to go too deep on that. And so the reason we're not going to is because we have a lot of other material that we can point you to that go much, much deeper into those conversations going forward. And I'll point those out here in just a moment. But I also want to talk a little bit about the second piece of this, which is getting to know you. And Suzanne is going to help me with both of these conversations today. So let me introduce Suzanne Wheeler, who's the managing director for our Amarillo office. So Suzanne, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Talking about one of my favorite subjects today.
This is we're going to talk about lots of really cool things today. My hope is we get to have a little bit of fun because it's been a tough year, right? I mean, there's been a lot going on, and there's been a lot of things that really has hit us hard. I hope that we can kind of bring not make light, but we can also have some fun today in our conversation. As we kind of talk about this year, Suzanne, I can't help but think again the two things that we want to talk about are the market and legislative issues that we've been facing this year and over the course of the last several years, but also the things that happen to, kind of working with individuals and the conversations that we're having with our clients. So as we kind of kick things off, I want to kind of start with this, and that is coming into 2020, there is no question in my mind that coming into 2020, we were raring, we were ready to go. It was an election year. We were excited about it being an election year. I know for a lot of people, regardless of the side of the coin you're on, we were excited about it being an election year. We were also, well, I don't know if we were too excited about this, but some of us might have been a little excited about this. We had the Secure Act. In 2017, we had the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, a little bit of a tax rewind. We had a lot of changes that happened with the TCJA that happened. We had changes to, standard deductions, SALT provisions, and so forth. Again, don't dig too deep on that. And that affected a lot of people in 2018 and then in 2019, right? And we were helping a lot of people navigate all those changes. But then, not to be outdone, we had the Secure Act, right? It's in 2019. It's like, wasn't it kind of like the stimulus thing we just had here like yesterday? Wasn't it, Suzanne? Wasn't it like it was passed like right at the end of 2019, right? And I don't know if people realize this, but that was one of the most sweeping or the biggest change we had to the retirement planning side of our lives then for probably 20 or probably 30 years. I mean, it was pretty incredible, the things that we saw changed just with the Secure Act. Just kind of a quick highlight of that, we saw changes to the distribution. So it's actually affected every aspect of retirement. It included the accumulation side, it included the distribution side when we get into retirement, and it included the other side of it, which was the legacy side if we didn't use all of our money during our lives. So stretch provisions were changed, RMDs were changed, being able to contribute later, and so forth. So Suzanne, when you were talking to clients after Secure Act, what were the big things that you were talking to them about?
I would say most of our clients were delighted to see that the age was stepped out to 72 before they were required to take those distributions. We had many people calling about, how does that affect me? What does that do for my situation? And honestly, we had more people that were excited about it than those that weren't. But then it also brought up many opportunities to think about how that was going to stretch. And while it may have helped the IRA owner, but what did that do to the beneficiaries? And so, tax planning there as well.
Absolutely. And I don't know a lot of folks who I spoke to advisors all over the country. one of the things that where I sit here at Mariner is I get to talk to all of our advisors throughout the entire country about things that are happening in their clients' lives, and Suzanne being one of them. And we talked a lot about the distribution if you don't use it all, right? You have you used to be that you could say, I'm going to leave it to my kids over their lifetime, and you can make those decisions. You can even set your trust as the beneficiary, and it would still carry out those provisions. Again, if you had it all worded correctly. But that all changed this year,
You
right?
did.
I mean that was you hit the nail on the head, which is new. Required new tax planning for the beneficiaries, maybe unlike than ever before. So we've been reminding folks this year that if you have your IRA, have your trust as your beneficiary in your IRA, if you have not done this already, you should be having a discussion with your estate planning attorney who helped you draft those documents, because you may or may not want to leave it, or you may need to make some adjustments there, because with the new Secure Act, it did impact that distribution more than you might think it did. So that was one of the things that we wanted to kind of touch on as well. Then, of course, there's no question this year has been what terms we're hearing unprecedented. It's been impactful. It's been painful. There's just a whole host of words that we could use of what's been going on this particular year. But COVID hit in March, of course, and with March we had some legislative changes and impacts with the CARES Act, right? So what were you talking to clients about regarding the CARES Act?
Well, many, many different things. I mean, it's one end to the other. The calls would come in, and people want to know when change happens. Everybody wants to know how that affects them. So looking at those different obstacles, which may have been an advantage or a disadvantage to certain people, and stepping down through them with them one by one to see how things change for them, their business, their families, and go from there.
Yeah, and I think that's we had a kind of a question that came up, kind of regarding advocacy of our clients, and what we really mean by that is really understanding what's going on in our clients' lives, and making sure that the value we're bringing is impacting their lives in the way that's most important to them. I kind of refer to it this way: when we get to know clients, we're getting to know what's important about money to them, but we're also getting to know what's important to them as well. And so when I used that term a little bit earlier, it wasn't to change any relationships you have with the current advisor or anything along those lines.
Sure.
This is kind of the way in which we do work with our clients. Whether your advisor might be using that term or not, that's kind of the way that I'm viewing things. And so as we think about this big picture, we think about the things that are happening. Again, we look more into what's happening in the last week. 2 days ago, we had the stimulus package that was passed as well. We're looking at further stimulus, further changes that are impacting business owners. PPP again. Hopefully, that's going to go further down into to the local to local businesses. The CARES brought with it some changes to charitable deductions that were above the lines, which means that you can, even if you're not deducting, you're doing an itemized deduction, you can still contribute to charities and take a deduction for some of those dollars. So there's some benefits there for you as well. If you weren't aware of that, that's occurring this year as part of the CARES Act, and it was extended going into next year. And of course, stimulus checks for some family members as well. And so even if some of these things don't affect you, they might be affecting your family members. And so it's important to this is where we have conversations, not just with our clients about what's pertinent for them, but potentially what's pertinent for some of their family members as well. I think you agree.
Sure, and that brings up a good point, because we've talked to more family members during this time period than we have in the past. We always try to include extended family when they're invited, but we're having so many calls about, I know this may not affect me, but how does this affect my son or my daughter? And can you start working with them to help them understand the benefits or the changes?
Yeah, exactly. I actually spoke with several advisors in March and April when CARES Act was passed, when we saw that the tax filing extensions were made. And so that meant that people who were able to contribute to IRAs or your HSA for the previous year, you had extended contribution capabilities. However, if you were one of the individuals impacted negatively by COVID, you may not have had the money for that. but
Correct.
perhaps the parents did. And so
Mhm.
we were talking to parents who were helping their kids with some of those contributions because their kids were no longer able to do it because of other circumstances, but at least the parents could and they could still help. So we were talking about ways families could help one another, and so and grandparents as well. And so that was another thing that we were doing. Well, when we talk about the kind of what's going on too with our finances, it's important to understand that we also help our clients through this year. I think especially we talked a lot about is your house in order, right? You were talking about that previously. There goes my light. So I'll ask you that question. I'll step off screen. Uh, so so when you were helping clients, so tell me, you were sharing a little bit about what you do with your clients to help them prepare, outside of COVID, but just in prepare in general. Can you share that?
Sure. So really, talking with our clients about how their plans are in place, revisiting who the beneficiaries are, who the trustee might be, things, if something were to happen to you tomorrow, is this how you want things to go in your life? And in the past, I know advisors can relate to this, and maybe other people on the call, but it would be, oh, we're okay. Yeah, everything's the same. This year was different, and people were more engaged, which was very healthy. There was a lot going on within our health world, but they wanted to talk about it. They wanted to revisit. They wanted to check those beneficiaries. Plus, they had time because many were working remotely, or maybe they were off for a period of time in quarantine, perhaps, but they had the time to do that. So we did a lot of discussing, and looking at what could happen as far as administration. With maybe
Sure.
some changes that are on the horizon. Should we be doing something now that in rather than waiting? So there were a lot of deep conversations, which in my mind were very, very healthy and helpful. And we did a lot of work.
Yeah, and you hit some really important points there. As far as one of the things that I was going to mention a bit earlier, I mentioned that we've gone deep into the conversation about what's been going on this year from an investment perspective. And many of our other webinars, we've talked a lot about the impact of the election.
Right.
Win or lose, doesn't matter which side on. There's going to be impact. We've had some webinars on that as well. So if you go to the marinwealthadvisors.com /live-webinars, which may have been where you registered for this webinar, you'll see a list of other webinars on there where we've dug a little bit deeper into each one of these. We had one recently on socially conscious investing as an example, but we also had one on the election. We had one on why does the stock market go up during a pandemic, which was always a puzzle to me. Intuitively, I understood technically the reasons why it
Sure.
didn't, but intuitively you kind of think, why is this happening? It just seems like it shouldn't happen, right? And that's the way we kind of all feel. So with that in mind, I'll also mention our podcast too. We've been covering a lot of relevant topics on our podcast series, Your Life Simplified, on these very topics too. So if you're looking for more kind of deeper discussions on this, I encourage you to kind of listen to those as well when you have some time. As we thought about, kind of the preparation, I can't help but think of this too in this preparation you were doing, is that think of this as a quiz for you all today. I know many of you may be writing notes. If you, maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but write this note down. And that is, can you find all of your important documents? That means, think about this. If you're going to go borrow to maybe buy a home, you got to have that box of stuff, right? You got to have your tax returns, you got to have your bank statements and stuff. But if you add that plus your legal documents, powers of attorney, healthcare directives, and all those kinds of things, can you find that in the next 30 minutes? So when this call ends today, do this for me and for your family. And that is, after this call, can you take the next 30 minutes? Can you find all those documents? If you cannot, that means you need some help getting organized. And maybe you need to take a step back and figure out what all those pieces are. We should, every single one of us on this call today should be able to do this. In fact, I quizzed my son, and you'll find this pretty funny, Suzanne. So I quizzed my son. He's 33 years old, and I tell him every time we on a trip, I said, look, if anything happens, get that envelope. you know, where I showed you where it is. I said, get that envelope. And I mentioned that again just like 2 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
And he goes, you've never told me that before. And I go, this is why you have to
Oh,
tell you like all the time, because you always forget.
but
So
see, they're paying attention this year. And
yes,
that's what I think is different.
yes,
And you make a very good point, because while we each need to know where those documents are, we need to let someone else know, like your
yes,
son. So it's great if both spouses know where to go get the file or the notebook or whatever
right.
it is. But who's that other person that knows how to get to it too? Or do you know how to tell someone how to get to it? And unfortunately, in this environment, talking to someone about where it is might not be an alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. And my wife was, in fact, we were having a conversation, and I'm going to admit something here. I probably shouldn't. She says, by the way, she goes, I don't have a list of your logins or passwords or anything like that. So if if something happens to you, I'm not going to be able to get into the computer. And I said, okay, we'll fix that. So so
Yes, very
I have to take my own medicine as well. But that was a good reminder to me that it's easy for these things to slip our mind. And I'm talking about this all the time. So I encourage you again, as soon as this call is over, in the next 30 minutes, I want you to go out and find all your stuff, right? I got 130 people on the call today. I want all 130 people to be able to find all that stuff before the end of the day, because that'll help you and your family should anything come up and you need help. So with that in mind, Suzanne, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk, again, there's two things we talk about. Market changes this year. We've had a lot of things had to happen this year. We've had a lot of things going on from a tax law perspective, but there's been a lot happening to you. I don't mean you, I mean you listening today. Those of you on the other end of this voice today have had things that have come up this year. You personally have been impacted this year in probably ways that you never expected at the beginning of the year. And so I want to spend some time talking with Suzanne. And so Suzanne, I waited till now to have you dig a little deeper into your bio. You'll notice at the front end of this, I didn't ask, well, like most guests, I use this, tell us a little about yourself. I decided to wait on that. So folks that are listening, you're probably wondering, why did he do that? Because he always does that. And so I decided to wait just a little bit. And I want to shift gears a little bit because there's a word that comes to my mind. And this is one of the reasons why, not one of the many reasons why I wanted Suzanne on this call today. But one of the reasons is that Suzanne is a certified financial transitionist. And so one of the words that came to my mind that describes this year more than anything else is transition. And all of us have gone through a transition this year that none of us expected. Not a single person on this call expected the transitions that we had to make this year. I tell this story here, and I'll shift gears just a moment, but I always tell the story. Where were you when COVID started, your COVID lockdown started?
Mhm.
I think all of you could probably think about that. For my wife and family and I, we had just come back from a trip from Disney World. We had gone to Disney World in late February, early March. And if you know about what happened in that period, on March the 13th, they closed Disney World for the first time ever. And so we were there the week before. And we came home, and my middle daughter actually got sick with all the symptoms that week after we got back. We don't know
Mm.
whether she had it or not because there were no tests that could be had at that point. But I always tell this part of the story too, and that is I put gas in my car. I filled up my tank when I got back. And I drive a Mini Cooper, so it only has a 10.5 gallon tank. I did not put any gas in that, Suzanne. I didn't put any gas in that car again until July.
Oh my goodness.
So that just tells you the impact, the transition that we made from living our lives to doing what we're doing here. So can you help us understand what a certified financial transitionist is? Because we've had a lot of financial transitions that occurred this year as well.
Sure. Well, when you're working with your financial advisor, probably the majority of you have a financial advisor that is a certified financial planner. And this certified financial transitionist pairs nicely with the CFP designation, which is technical. What's my asset allocation going to be? Do I have enough money to live? Where the transitionist is more on the emotional side of money.
Yeah.
So, as Susan Bradley, who I studied under for this designation, has said, when life changes, money changes. And when money changes, life changes. So we've really, we have transitions throughout our lives, many transitions, but it's never been brought to light like it has this year. So working with, what can be. I just experienced an end of something, an end of, a career, a end of a marriage, an end of that end of marriage, whether it's death or divorce. So when it can also be, I won the lottery. So
Yeah.
they don't all have to be somewhat negative. And so it's helping that person go through that scenario of becoming at their new normal. And I know we hear a lot about new normal, and the time period of getting from one end to the other end is different for everyone. But it doesn't have to always be a doom and gloom, sad time. But it is getting someone from point A to B so that they understand the financial outlooks, that they're able to make decisions on their own where maybe they haven't done that in the past.
Yeah, all really great points, and part of that transition too can be mitigated through preparation. We were just talking about the importance of preparing and making sure that we have things in order. I had a question here about that list of stuff. So the best way to describe the list of stuff that you should be able to find in the next 30 minutes is, imagine you need to go get a home loan, and the next 30 minutes you need to give that box of stuff to your mortgage lender. It's that same box of stuff. So it's going to be the tax returns. It's going to be all of your pay stubs, your bank statements, your investment statements. Think of it, the money that you own, and the things that you own, and the things that you owe, right? So that's that. If you think of that comprehensive list, in addition to that, it's all the legal stuff. Those are the things. So kind of switching back to the transition kind of conversation here, when we think of the transition though, you mentioned that we've had what I feel like this year. I feel like we've spent so much time in the negative side this year because of the just the mental state that we're all in. I mean, me personally, going from literally from February to July, leaving my house maybe a dozen times, and that was just food runs. And we kind of joke, I'm going on a food run.
Right.
I'll try to I'll see what I can get, kind of thing.
Hopefully
It was kind of
larger than the Mini Cooper.
I did. I took my wife's car, but you couldn't get toilet paper, so it didn't matter anyway.
Sure.
But anyway, so it was like, okay, well, but there've been a lot of good transitions too. I've had several friends that have had births this year.
Yes.
So new life coming in. You mentioned retirement earlier. How has this year been different for folks that were retiring, or people retiring that hadn't planned on retiring? Are you seeing that?
I would say both. Maybe that it was a forced retirement.
Okay.
Or maybe they just moved up that retirement date. Instead of oh my gosh, what am I going to do with my time? There are many people out in the world today wondering what are they going to do with their time until they can go to those events that they normally had been attending, or working in the office, seeing their colleagues. So, we talk about your transition that you were talking about, the gas in the car. But when you throw in a death of a loved one, this year, having a death of a loved one is hard anytime. Yeah. But this year, we're seeing where people have died without their family members by their side. The thought of a survivor thinking that their spouse died alone is very hard. But then they've had this deep loss, and now they have isolation because we're all staying away from each other. And then maybe they didn't feel like they had closure because there wasn't the proper service at the end. So when you think about, I step back a lot when I'm thinking about my own family situation and, having the gas in the car and haven't been anywhere. But I haven't lost a family member. And so I think, really that is probably one of the hardest things about this year. And it's different than if you lost a spouse the year before. Not that the hurt is any different, but you're alone. You're more alone now
Yeah.
than ever. On the retirement side, that can be happy. We've had people think that they're ready for retirement, but then they get home and they don't know what they're going to do with themselves. Nobody is knowing what they're going to do with themselves in March and April. And so, we're all trying to figure out this together, but we've had many friends, family, that say, oh my gosh, I can't imagine continuing the line of work I was in under this pandemic. Maybe it was a total relief that they weren't in their line of work during this time. And for some who were contemplating, it just seemed the right time to start earlier. So, working through how they're going to, take care of not only their finances, but, not be an irritant to maybe a spouse at home.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, we've seen divorce. And I remember talking to a colleague in March, and my thought was, of course, I'm not only thinking about portfolios and how to manage them, but also the emotional side. And with everybody working at home or being stuck at home, quarantined or staying safe, how was it going to be with couples? Were they going to be able to weather this time of being that close together without being in the car to go around the block? Or I think fitness went up greatly. People were out on walks, maybe to have some distance there. But then some people took the opportunity to think, is this all it is to life? And now I'm seeing what life might look like during retirement, and am I with the person that I thought I was with? And maybe some adjustments were happening along those lines. But again, when you look at all these different transitions, it's an end of something, but it's also a beginning of something else. And so that's probably one of the most gratifying things that I get to work on, is seeing someone that has had the most horrendous experience, but yet to watch them work their way out of that with help and to become their new person. And so, it takes a village. I've always said life is hard and it takes all of us to get through it, but we can step back and see the positives if we start making this list.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So many nuggets there. I could probably expand on any one of those for another hour, so we're not going to do that. But you said a lot of things there, and I think about, kind of my year and my wife, she works retail. And so she had a part-time job. And so that was, of course, shut off. She was back for a week when we got back from her vacation in February or March. And then both of us have been at home, and our middle daughter actually works in retail as well. And so they were not called back to work until July. My daughter was called back to July just long enough to close the store, pack up and close the store that she worked at for the previous 7 years. And so everything was cut off. All of her friends, her network, social group, everything was just decimated right then. Not that it hadn't been, eaten away during the first few months.
Sure.
My wife went back to work, and she's actually working, back to full time. So that's been a good shift for her. But during that period, though, we were all at home all the time. And it really gave us, and I remember having that conversation with her, and I said, you know what this tells me right now is that this is what retirement could look like if you're not really prepared to retire to something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I said that, and she goes, well, what do you mean? I go, well, think about it. If you just ended up just stopped working and you had nothing to go to when you stopped working, and you didn't transition to something different, didn't retire to something different, so to speak, this is what it's going to be. You're not going anywhere. You're just sitting at the house. Maybe you're doing odds and ends at the house, right? And so I said, this really has given me a new perspective in several things. Number one, it gave me a new perspective and what my own retirement, retiring to, but also it reminded me of, wow, I don't need as much as I thought either.
Right. You're exactly right. You're
Right?
exactly right. And I
Yeah.
think people are stepping back and thinking about that, especially we've just gone through the holidays and they've looked different,
Yes.
as you might expect, and a little more low key that I think maybe people have enjoyed and they might continue those traditions. So, when we're in the midst of a storm, it's hard to plan, but if you can step back, take a deep breath, and then see all the possibilities. While it may not be the traditional way, start a new way. It's fine to start new traditions.
Yeah, and I think these are all great things. So I'd love to hear some, if those of you have started new traditions this year, love to hear those stories of the new traditions you started. We didn't, we I wouldn't say we started any new traditions. My daughter and son-in-law, they live 3 hours south of us. So for the several weeks leading up to that, we all did really well at making sure that we were quarantining, we were
Right.
self-isolating, and so forth, so that we could get together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that enabled us to do that. Our other son works in the public space in banking, and so he's in front of people all the time, and so he chose to continue to self-isolate just because he did not want to risk his potential exposure and not be aware of it. And
Right.
so that was probably the hardest thing for us. The other hard part for us was, and again, I don't hope this tradition can continue, was my dad's 92 years old. And so, you hate to think about, there's not as many of those days left, holidays left. And so not seeing him this Christmas was really difficult.
Right.
Um, but I could tell a funny story about that later, but, but anyway, so there are some traditions I hope don't stick and some that do, but I'm just curious, anybody have any good traditions that you started this year that might be a little bit different? Maybe on the philanthropy side or things like that might be interesting to hear as well. Suzanne, I've got a question here too, from someone says, curious to how you handled clients' fears around elections, coming election, what happened in Nashville, the potential another market drop, the rush to certain kinds of investments and all that stuff. How are you handling those conversations with clients?
We sit down with clients that have uh, maybe they're living off their portfolio and they are anxious about what could be. The market has just, gone up and down over time periods, but most people need to be invested in the market in order to meet their goals. So we spend a lot of time of showing clients how they're going to live off their portfolio in the next year, the next 2 to 3 years, while maybe the market can recover if we have, received some great volatility that we weren't expecting. And, March was a perfect example. I mean, we had a beautiful 2019. January, February, we're feeling really good. And
Yep.
then things start to tumble when we're ready to go on spring break. And so, we were very fortunate that we had clients that were prepared to weather the storms. Now, that's not to say that we didn't do a lot of hand holding and a lot of talking, but if you were to maybe offload some of those equities during the March time period to stay out for a while, that does make a difference on where your return sits today. Whether you
Yeah.
decided to get back in April, May, whatever, you've lost some of those days of market performance. So I think when they know that they have the security to pay their bills for the next few years, then that really unloads a lot of stress. And looking at history, of course, we can only give our thoughts of what the future holds, and we work a great deal on that, as well as our investment committee, to guide us what we may anticipate over the next 6 months or 12 months. So I think more than ever, it's talking,
Yeah.
listening to those fears, and being able to address them.
Yeah, that's so important. I think, as you said there, one of the most important things that we do. You heard me say this earlier, that there's really two big pieces that we help our clients with. That is understanding the importance of money in their life,
Right.
and understanding what's most important to your life. And one may require a little bit more telling than others, the money side sometimes, but we have to listen a lot to what's happening on the emotional side, on everything, what's important to you. We ask a lot of questions, hopefully the thought-provoking, to the point that where you get a little uncomfortable. If when I talk to folks, I've worked with clients in the past, and if they're a little uncomfortable, then at least I know that I'm provoking them to think a little bit about what's going on. And it's not intentional. It's just really it's more important to understand what's really happening, what's most important to them, because that's how we want to help them move forward to where they want to be. And I think that's really important if your advisors walking you through that process. We could spend a lot of time, I think, talking about other transition types. We talked, about that. But any final thoughts on just a transition conversation? Key things you want folks to kind of step away from this call today. If they remember nothing else, remember this about transitions.
Well, I would say that we are all having different transitions within our lives. Maybe more traumatic, more of them certainly this year. But I would say that it may not feel like you're going to get through this, but with help and guidance, you will. And the other side, while you will miss that career, you will miss that spouse, whether it's divorce or death. But you might come out to a whole different environment that is joyful. And so I think, be sure you have someone that's listening. It can be a time of depression. Please reach out to someone, because life can get better. The other thing I would mention is that I've seen a lot this year, and I know many advisors have seen it as well, and many on the call today. Our charitable contributions have never felt better. It's never been a better time to give. It's never felt better to give. And we're seeing a lot of gifting, whether it's by way of appreciated stock, by way of cash on the table, through donor advised funds, that people truly want to help each other. And so, and we're also seeing money exchanged from Gen 1 to Gen 2. So maybe gifting more than you have in the past, or looking at those estate tax exemption. And I would say my final thought would be kindness. We don't know what people are going through. We have no idea. So even if you see someone that is short-tempered at the grocery store because there's no toilet paper, or the pharmacy because there's no line, or they haven't received that call for the vaccine, try to take a deep breath and treat everyone with kindness and set that example, because we need to be reaching out to those around us, whether it be our family members, our clients, or our neighbors, because we can get through this together.
I appreciate those words, because those are all very, very important. As we if we're looking at things that we learned this year, these transitions we've had, if we walk away from 2020, if we remember nothing else and remember that piece, the importance of that. And I think this year it's been so much more important for folks to recognize the kindness that we have more than any other time in our history. And our children are going to be learning from our examples as well, so that they will learn that to the next. If you're looking at next generational, training, if you will, they will see how we interacted with the world right now as well. All great stuff. So I have a couple of questions here I wanted to pick up on that came through. final note there. I appreciate that. You have a question here regarding letter of instruction. Can you expand on the necessary elements? Letter of instructions are really designed for as an opportunity. They're not legal documents, not legally binding documents. They're really a design for you to share those things that are important for you to pass on. They could be any kind of thing. It could be your values. They could be instructions to take care of a certain pet, or maybe it's a certain item that you want to, you're passing it on to someone else, and you want to give the reasons why behind it. It's your opportunity to leave instructions beyond. So another example that I use too is I have a sister who has a daughter who's special needs. And so she had a very, very detailed letter of instruction because her daughter is on the autism spectrum, and she's not high functioning, meaning she requires a lot of care. And so there are a lot of things that would disrupt her life. And so my sister's the first one who told me about a letter of instruction probably about 10 or 12 years ago. And it was basically, she has everything outlined in her letter of instruction of here's what she likes to do on this day of the week, this day of the week, this day of the week, this day of the week. It was very, very detailed. Don't do this, don't do that. So letters of instruction can be, whoa, there we go. Letters of instruction can be very detailed, or they can be very kind of broad. But again, they're the things that you want people to know about you, and at the event of your death. So I appreciate that question, because that's not one we talk about very often. Another tradition I think we all heard this year was a new term. It's called Zoom. It's now become Kleenex. Right? Doesn't matter what service you're using, it's all Zoom.
Right.
And so everybody's using Zoom for a variety of different things.
Thank
I
goodness
had a
for technology.
Thank goodness for Zoom. I guess I got to tell this really funny story. So I use Zoom at work, and so I thought I'll just use Zoom for. We had to have a family conversation about my dad. He's 92, he's struggling, and so we're having this family discussion. And none of us are in the same place, obviously, because of COVID. So I thought I'll just send everybody a Zoom link. Well, I have one sister who can get on. I have one sister who can't. She just, for the life of her, can't get on. I have another sister that her internet just won't. She's just not sure what to do. So I had one, and I have several sisters, as you can tell. So I had one sister that was on Zoom. I had one that was on my phone. I had one that was in another. I don't remember what it was. I think maybe a phone call on another. But I had 3 devices all stacked together where they could hear each other on the microphones and on my computer. It was hilarious. And I go, we have all this technology. You guys need to learn how to use this.
Exactly. That's something that I think everyone's technology skills have improved. And I know, we're seeing people in their 80s, upper 80s, maybe into 90s that are using Zoom now. I attended a Zoom funeral. So, things are different, but we're surviving. I wanted to add one tidbit to maybe the caller that had the question. On a lot of our trust documents or wills, there's that Schedule B or Exhibit A or something like that, where you need to write in these special gifts, meaning personal items, that you would like someone to receive. So maybe it's your wedding ring. You would like that to go to someone. Take some time to fill out that. I bet when we're looking at, if we have our documents together in 30 minutes, if we flip to that page, I would guess that a high percentage of us have not filled out that page. So again, make it fun. I've heard of people, gifting those items now so they can watch people enjoy them, or drawing numbers at, an event, maybe it's a Zoom event, and gifting that way. But if we think long enough and we're creative enough, or you're out on social media, you'll see creative things. Yeah. We can do some fun things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've seen a lot of things out there as well. There's one other question that came in. I missed this. I apologize. And so, let's say, for example, I'm working with an advisor, and the advisor has been really great to work with, from a data numbers person, and experience has been fine. But we're really not talking about this transition stuff, the emotional stuff, as much as maybe I feel like I need right now. What can I hire you as an example to talk just about transitions, or someone like you? How would you help, or kind of, I guess, suggest this person move forward with that?
Yes, you can definitely work with me on transitions only, or you can go out to the Sudden Money Institute, and you can see a list of certified financial transitionists. Or maybe if you like what your advisor's doing, ask them if they have anyone in their workplace that can help with that or guide you. But if there's anything I could do, I would love to help.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and it's a great point. I think this is one of the other things we're seeing too, is we're seeing, executive coaches, business coaches that
Right.
are also working kind of in this space too. And so I know I've worked with coaches in the past who specialize in that specific arena, where you're making this transition from retirement to something, but you
Mm-hmm.
need to navigate all the different moving parts. And you may have it all in your head, you just haven't organized it well enough to really
Right.
articulate it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what coaches will help you do, is help you kind of walk through that and pull it all out. They don't give you the answers, they help you discover the answers and empower you. And so
Exactly.
that's important.
Help you
Um,
create your own roadmap.
exactly. So all great stuff. I don't have any other questions or comments here to kind of go back to. I do want to thank everybody for being on the call today. As we kind of wrap things up, as always, we'd love to hear from you. I mentioned this earlier, that if you have questions, and we talked earlier about not being able to answer tax questions today. So if you have questions, send those questions to qa@marinerwealthadvisors.com. If you're on social media, pay attention to social media and follow us on social media, because we actually take a lot of these questions that we get at qa@marinerwealthadvisors.com, and we actually create little vignettes. They're like 3-minute videos of answering that question. And so we've answered dozens and dozens of questions from folks over the course of this last year. So encourage you to follow that. Maybe your question will be one of those that's chosen to be selected. Also, as we move into 2021, we have found that a lot of folks, are, coming to these webinars, gaining a lot from these webinars, walking away with some new ideas and things to do. Again, in the next 30 minutes after this call ends, you're going to go out and find all your stuff, right? You already mentioned, okay, we'll go with that again. But there are a lot of other topics that we could cover. In fact, on January the 11th at 4 p.m. Central, we'll have another webinar. It will be called the Crystal Ball 2021. Jeff Crumpelman, who's one of our chief investment officers, will be on the call, who will actually kind of give his thoughts about, what we could maybe expect for 2021, or kind of what we're seeing for 2021 as of now, right? Because anything can change as they did last year. But I encourage you to attend that. And Jeff's been on many of these calls in the past, but I'd like to hear from you on this too. So again, if you have a topic idea that you want to send us, that you'd like us to cover, topics that we're thinking about right now. As an example, we're pulling together a women's discussion panel, and Suzanne will probably call you back on that one, and Jana as well. And where we're kind of talking about issues that are unique to women. So that's one of the topics we're looking at. Hiring wealth advisors, what things you should be thinking about if you're talking to someone. Educational, kind of related topics, and getting into college. How do we manage college today in light of what's distance learning, and how does that going to forever impact us? We touched on this a little bit, and that's the psychology of retirement, retiring to something rather than just stopping the work. And then charitable planning, Medicare, Social Security, so a whole host of topics. So if you don't have any, you just want to come to those, that's fine. But if you have other topics you'd like us to talk about, again, send those topics to qa@marinerwealthadvisors.com. Just put on the front end of that, so topic suggestion for webinars. But we will have these every month. So it'll be once a month. So look for a calendar on the marinerwealthadvisors.com/5-webinars. You'll see the new registration links there. So that was a lot. With that, I want to thank everybody for being here today. December 30th, we got one more day for the new year. Have a happy and safe new year. Suzanne, thank you so much for being here today. This has been a joy seeing you. I see a lot of faces. Maybe one day we'll actually get to sit in the same room again. But anyway, it's been great to be here, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.